Call to order the Oregon City Council meeting of September 23rd of 2024. The time is 7:02 p.m. and if you would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Rossman, will you please take a roll call of council, please?
Mrs. Ackerman? Here. Mr. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Horniak?
Here.
Mrs. Paula?
Here.
Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Salander?
Here.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Here. Thank you, Ms. Rossman. Please note all council members are present this evening. Also joining us this evening, we have Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Joel Mazer, Clerk of Council Cassie Rawson, Law Director Melissa Purpura, Public Service Director Paul Roman, Police Chief Brandon Began, Assistant Police Chief Ryan Spangler, Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien, Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins, and Finance Director Nick Roman. Council, moving into this first item on our agenda tonight is to approve the minutes from the September 9th, 2024 regular council meeting and the September 16th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the September 9th, 2024 regular council meeting and the September 16th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second. Seconded by Mr. Drake. We have a motion by Mr. Reeves, a second by Mr. Drake to accept the minutes as presented. Council, any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are accepted as presented. Moving on to the first item we have for this evening, which is persons and delegations. And we have Judge Petroff here to address council. Judge, if you just go to the mic and just tell us who you are and where you live.
Thank you. Donald Petroff, 1521 South Stadium Road, Oregon, Ohio. Mayor and members of council, I just want to give you a brief report on the first event we had on our beautiful pickleball courts. That was the Learn to Play on Saturday in conjunction with the Honey Fest from 10 to 2. Roaring success, even though we had very little publicity. We had 8 coaches, 4 women and 4 men. They all wore the shirt we designed for Oregon. Coach on the back. We were busy. We had the mayor out. He saw all the people there. We had grade schoolers, high school, junior high. We had men, women, seniors. From 10 to 1:30, we were really busy. And after that, it got a little too hot, I guess, for people. Everybody just loved the courts. Wanted to thank council and the mayor for putting these courts here. We had some very skilled players from across the river come over to see our courts. And they told us they believe that our outdoor courts are the best in Northwest Ohio. So you did a good job. Everybody thanks you for it. These shirts now, Debbie Bellegrin, who does all that work for the rec department, shirts and whatnot, will have a site up where you can buy these shirts and pay directly through there so the rec department doesn't have to mess with it. So we thank you on behalf of that. Now there's going to be a women's clinic very shortly. That'll be in the evening. And I understand that city employees want to have their clinic too. So I'm going to be a little busy. Thank you very much. It was a great success.
Thank you, Judge Petroff. Very much appreciate the comments, and we love hearing when we have something that people perceive as the best around. And I will just give my input. Anytime I've been out there, that is a very popular place for people to be. They are constantly playing daylight hours, nighttime hours, so really enjoy that. Thank you, Judge. Council, this evening we have 2 items added to the agenda, which are items 161 of 2024 and 162 of 2024. I'd seek a motion to add those to this evening's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Paula. Thank you, Mrs. Paula. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, items 161 and 162 are added to the agenda for this evening. We'll move right into item 155. All these items except the last 2 were presented at the Committee of the Whole last week, so I will ask if there's anything additional as we move into it. First item on the agenda for this evening is item 155 of 2024. Is there anything additional, Mr. Roman, on this? Thank you. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 155 of 2024 as ordinance 155 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing and directing the finance director to make supplemental appropriations and interfund and intra-fund transfers on an as-needed basis for fiscal year 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Ross and council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenzeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for passage of ordinance number 155 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. We have a motion by Mr. Wallenzeck, seconded by Mr. Slander for ordinance 155 of 2024. Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Wallenzeck,
Yes.
Mr. Slander,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 155 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 156 of 2024. Again, Mr. Roman, anything additional?
Nothing additional.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Slander.
Mr. Roman, Nick Roman, can you, I got some questions since last week, just a little bit of clarification on this. And would you mind just doing a quick kind of recap as far as like when these taxes are collected, from what time period? And then the other question, which I assume it would not involve any levies that are up for election this year, for vote this year, but just for clarification, just a quick recap, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. With these, the payments are, the taxpayers are paying on January 31st and then on July 31st. And then we typically receive the funds in February and August. If we didn't make this request now, we'd have to make the request then. So this is just doing it ahead of time. They ask that we do this. And this would include, if the senior levy does pass, this would be part of that as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Thank you, Mr. Slander. Council, any other questions on 156? Hearing none, I will assign item 156 of 2024 as ordinance resolution 156 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
A resolution requesting the auditor of Lucas County, Ohio for an advance payment of the current collection of taxes due to the city of Oregon.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenzeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of resolution number 156 of 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. Thank you, Mr. Slander. We have a motion by Mr. Wallenzeck, seconded by Mr. Slander for resolution 156 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Wallenzeck,
Yes.
Mr. Slander,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Resolution 156 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 157, or resolution, item 157. Is there anything additional from the administration, Mr. Roman?
Nothing additional.
Anything, questions from council? Hearing none, I will assign item 157 of 2024 as resolution 157 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
A resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission of Lucas County, Ohio, authorizing the tax levies and certifying the same to the county auditor.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenzeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of resolution number 157 of 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. Motion by Mr. Wallenzeck, seconded by Mr. Slander for resolution 157 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Wallenzeck,
Yes.
Mr. Slander,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Resolution 157 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 158 of 2024. Anything additional?
Nothing additional.
Thank you. Council, questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 158 of 2024 as ordinance 158 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into an agreement with Donald J. Schoenhardt and Associates, Inc., 5307 Franklin Street, Hilliard, Ohio, for consulting services to provide assistance in the preparation of the annual GAAP financial report in the amount of $16,800 per year plus travel reimbursement for fiscal year 24, fiscal year 2025, and fiscal year 2026 reports.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenzeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for passage of ordinance number 158 of 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. Thank you, Mr. Slander. We have a motion by Mr. Wallenczak, seconded by Mr. Slander for ordinance 158 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Wallenczak,
Yes.
Mr. Slander,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 158 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 159 of 2024, presented by Mr. Mazur. Mr. Mazur, anything to add additional to this?
Nothing to add unless you want me to do a recap.
Council, do you want to recap or are we good with it?
Not necessary.
Okay, any questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 159 of 2024 as ordinance 159 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, city administrator, and finance director to enter into a contract with Local 755 and Ohio Council 8, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, or AFSCME, AFSCME, AFL-CIO, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance number 159 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Second. Seconded by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. We have a motion by Mr. Wallenczak, seconded by Mr. Drake for ordinance 159 of 2024. Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Wallenczak,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Salander.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 159 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 160 of 2024. Mr. Roman, anything additional? Council, any questions on item 160? Hearing none, I will assign item 160 of 2024 as ordinance 160 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order to Deere and Company 2000 John Deere Run Cary, North Carolina for the purchase of a John Deere 5100E cab tractor with a John Deere FC12E flex wing rotary cutter to be used by the street division in the Department of Public Service in an amount not to exceed $87,168.08 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President,
Sorry to see, Mr. Reeves.
I move for passage of ordinance 160 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Polliff. Thank you, Mrs. Polliff. We have a motion by Mr. Reeves, a second by Mrs. Polliff for ordinance 160 of 2024. Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Solander,
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 160 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to the items for consideration, we have item 161 of 2024, and we'll go to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to amend the city's LPA agreement, that's local public agency agreement with ODOT, to reflect an additional $600,000 in grant funding for the Navarre Avenue Safety Improvement Project. City's original grant of $5 million is from ODOT's safety funding, and this additional $600,000 from ODOT's urban paving program. So this amendment will just go into what was already passed as the LPA agreement. So happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council. Hearing no questions, I will assign item 161 of 2024 as ordinance 161 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor to enter into an amended agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation to accept $600,000 in additional funding from the Federal Highway Administration for the engineering design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction of LUC SR 2-21.72 Navarre Avenue Safety PID 118234 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance number 161 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Solander. Thank you, Mr. Solander. Motion by Mr. Wallenczak, seconded by Mr. Solander for ordinance 161 of 2024. Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Wallenczak,
Yes.
Mr. Solander,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Thank you, Council. Ordinance 161 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 162 of 2024, which we did discuss last week at the committee meeting, but we'll go to Mr. Roman as well. Mr. Roman?
Thank you, Mr. President. So this ordinance is needed to amend the city's refuse collection contract with Republic Services and then to extend the contract for an additional 3 years. The terms of the extension is in Exhibit A. And just as a short summary, the increase would be 10.8%. That is to the unit rate per home per month. So 10.8% in the first year, 5% in the second year, and another 5% in the third year. As you mentioned, we did discuss this at our committee meeting. I think, as noted, some of the newer contracts with our neighboring cities had a unit cost for limited that was just as high as what is being offered in this extension. And I know Republic Services did provide a response to council's questions as to the utilization of more than one cart. Hopefully that was satisfied. I don't know if there's any other questions on that. And we're certainly here happy to answer it. I think, to me, and just my general thought, I think the only way you'll see a savings at this point is to go to limited, which would be less service. And I think even when you do that, we would not receive bids for unlimited, maybe one, but that'd be it. And I think probably the biggest issue with us is yard waste. I think over the next couple of years, we need to work towards removing yard waste because that will be likely the requirement for future bids. Even if you went to bids now, they may offer you a price and they'll say, but we don't accept yard waste. So that's an issue as well. So I think this gives us a little bit of time to plan. I think it is the way to go. So that's my opinion. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Thank you, Mr. President. Last week at the committee of the whole meeting, we spoke about educating the public on do's and don'ts, how I know that the service provider would like it so that their drivers aren't out of their trucks. We've talked about education. What are we going to do to educate our public on not placing something on top of a closed lid, stacking the cans too close to each other? What is the plan to educate the public?
Well, I think, and Mr. President, Mr. Wallenczak, I think the last time we did the contract, we tried to put out a lot on the Facebook, and it doesn't get, well, we didn't put it on Facebook, we put it on the city website, and it didn't get much traffic. I think Facebook is the way to go. And I think we do need to revamp some of our rules. I think one of the pet peeves of the public is just people who put their carts out, they don't pull them back, the next day. Sometimes it goes, several days go by. The rules do say you're to pull them back, but they're not codified. They're just the rules that are on our website or, on Facebook. But I think we need to really push what our rules are on Facebook and promote that. I think with the eviction, I think we will bring in legislation to actually fine residents if they simply put out everything out at the curb, that it will not be picked up. And if it's not put in the proper containers for the regular refuse collection, then there'd be a fine for that. And we would need legislation for that. And we would certainly refer to our rules in that legislation, and that would be codified. So I do think we need to revamp our rules and push it out hard on Facebook. So,
thank you.
Mr. President,
Go ahead, Mr. Major.
if I may comment, Mr. Wallenczak, Paul and I will work with Cassie to get some type of educational flyer or something out to the public so we can post it on Facebook. So there's a little bit more education, and Paul, you're right. I mean, Facebook is the way to reach out, the best way for us to reach out to people rather than on a website.
I do think it would be important to talk to our service provider and see if they have something
Yeah. Yep.
already.
they would, excuse me, Mr. President, Republic would certainly partner with us. A lot of what we had on the city website was from Republic, and then we'd refer them to our rules and regs, which is kind of like from the bid specs, and they're kind of mismatched, I think, to do it proper. So Republic would assist us on that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
Mr.
Council, any
President.
additional questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
thank you. I I appreciate the extra information that was sent out during the week, and it was very informational. So thank you very much for that. And I think it was very, it explained exactly what we were trying to figure out. So I can't thank you enough for the information that was sent out, Rochelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, any additional questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake.
yeah, the only thing I'd like to bring up is, I know the people that plow snow in the winter, a lot of times people put them out in the street. They got to go around them. I just wondered partly what Dennis said about informing the people where to put them. I know I talked to one resident yesterday. I think he had a garbage bag, and the guy picked it up with the claws, and he was hoping it didn't rip. And the guy got it in there, and there was no problem. And also, just to add, the majority of the people I've talked to were all in favor. They're happy with the service they currently have. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to be here last week, so I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mrs. Polliff.
Thank you, Mr. President. This morning, I got a couple of phone calls from residents in regards to messes that the garbage men leave behind. And we do need education out there, because when I spoke to Beth and Streets this morning, it's really important to make sure that even though you have that one canister or that one garbage can, everything in there has to be bagged, because when they lift it up, it goes everywhere. So.
And I
Yeah,
hear, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Well, I guess I respond to that because a lot of the rules are already out there. Unfortunately, they're on the website. No one goes there to look.
Right.
You know, the garbage cans are supposed to be in your apron, and you know, a certain distance from the road edge, and you know, 6 inches apart so the claw can grab them. We do want everything bagged, and we want everything in the can as much as possible.
And they're not unreasonable. It's not an unreasonable thing to follow, because the garbage trucks cannot back up, and they will not get out to pick up what didn't get into the truck. They don't get out of their truck, especially when they're in more condensed neighborhoods where houses are close together and they've got one little area to go in between cars that are parked on each side. So it's really important to follow those rules. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Polliff. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any additional questions?
Mr. President.
Mr. Walensay.
One more thing. I know this has been a pet peeve of a number of people on Friday or in the mornings, the trash collection in front of Clay High School, this section of Seaman Road. It happens right at the beginning of school when kids are trying to go to school, and you end up having a backup from the traffic signal at Wynn all the way past the city building of people trying to get around the service provider. Is there any way that we can communicate with the service provider to not pick up on Seaman Road in front of the high school all the way to Wynn, maybe till about 8:30 in the morning, so that there's not a huge traffic jam of people trying to get around him?
Yeah, I see Rochelle making a note, and
Yeah, I
I'm
was
sure
gonna
that
say.
we can make that suggestion and change, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walensay. Council, anything additional?
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
and I'd like to add this, had we not had an option to renew, we wouldn't probably see this option as a viable option. So when this 3-year contract runs out, we're going to see a different look of services that are actually offered to us. So we'll try to get a heads up on that well within a year before it ends, so we can start like before. And I know Kathy, you put that out there, that would you like to continue with unlimited pickup? We won't be able to use phrases like that because I doubt whether we'll even have that as an option, the exact service that we have. So we'll try to find out time when this expires to see what our options will actually be, so the people can get used to making adjustments.
Mr. President?
Ms. Pollock.
No, I appreciate that, Mayor. But with my post, I also put on that 10% increase, the 5%.
No, I
increase.
understand that, but I'm
Right.
just saying,
And they were overwhelmingly, we want it, no matter what it costs, extra. And they saw that number on there, so.
but I'm saying that we might not even get that as an option of, anybody might not even bid on that.
Right,
So,
right.
and just the type of service of I think you're gonna see more likely, everything has to come within a container that can be picked up automatically. So there's gonna be some changes, and,
And I think
and-
they're aware of that. I really do, because they want to hold on to unlimited as long as they can. I think that's the bottom line.
Thank you, Ms. Pollock. Thank you, Mayor. Council, anything additional? Hearing none, I will assign item 162 of 2024 as ordinance 162 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor, finance director, and director of public service to enter into an amended agreement with Public Services of Toledo. Legal entity name is Allied Waste Services of North America LLC, 6749 South Dixie Highway, Erie, Michigan, in order to extend the collection and disposal of refuse and yard waste services for an additional 3-year period, including terms listed in the amendment, per attached Exhibit A, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move for passage of ordinance 162 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. We have a motion by Mr. Reeves, seconded by Mr. Drake for ordinance 162 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman? Yes. Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes,
Mr. Slander?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Thank you, Council. Ordinance 162 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Council, we do have one liquor permit before us this evening. The permit information had been shared out with all of you. It was shared with each of the departments, as is typically the case. A couple of the departments did come back with some notes on there as well. So I would ask at this time, basically our request is to check the box for a hearing or check the box that we don't request a hearing. Is there anything from the administration on this particular thing before we move forward with discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
the law director, Melissa Pecora, has advised me that any issues that do exist could be handled inside our building to address those issues. So we didn't see a need for a hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. Fair enough. Mr. Room, anything or anybody that was review of this? Anything to add? Okay. Council, comment, questions?
Mr. President?
Ms. Paula?
So with what the mayor had said, are we asking for a hearing or not?
Not.
We're not?
I think that's a recommendation, as we talked about immediately before the meeting, and I'll just state my opinion as a member of council. We have concerns in 2 of our departments for noncompliance. I think that's the specific reason to request a hearing, so that there is a due process of having to go through. Understand we have compliance mechanisms in place. But when I had asked how long these items had been open, I didn't get a clear answer of what that is. And I would say it questions the integrity of the applicant if they've already got 2 concerns. And I think that's where we wouldn't want the state to do a review. But again, that's one council person's opinion.
Mr. President,
Ms. Paula?
can I then move to instruct the clerk to mark the box that we do need a hearing?
You certainly can. Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Thank you, Ms. Paula.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. Thank you. Moved by Mrs. Pauloff, seconded by Mr. Slander to check the box that says we do request a hearing. Counselor, are there any objections? Hearing none, we will check the box to request a hearing on the new liquor permit. And that concludes all the items we have on the agenda. We will move to the mayor's report. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I have no report.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mazer?
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a few items. One, I wanted to address the issue with the property on Grange Street. I'm sure everybody's aware of this at this point. There's a nuisance property on Grange Street. Some of the neighbors of this property have complained about the condition of it. It did go through the court process. The owner was fined, but there was no action taken on the property itself. Just wanted to let everybody know that I did talk to the owner. We did file, by the way, we did file new charges. We are taking it through the process again. This time we can be a little more aggressive. And I did inform the owner of that process, but he also did say that he does have a buyer for both, for two of the lots. There's a house that's habitable, I'll say, and then the one that's not. The other one still needs a little work, but the plan is to demolish the derelict property. He did come by to this week, today actually, and picked up a demo permit application. He was very apologetic. He's apologized to the neighbors and to everybody and to all of us. He wanted me to share that with everybody, and he's going to do his best to make it right. One of the items with this is that a new buyer may request, because of the lot sizes, don't be surprised if this happens, but because of the lot sizes, because of that neighborhood, South Shore neighborhood, they're very small lots. So there may be a request at some point to go to the BZA to the Board of Zoning Appeals because of these setback rules and things like that. So, and from my understanding, the BZA has been accommodating in the past because of that. And as long as it fits the neighborhood, then usually they're apt to, it just based on their history, to pass certain things as long as it's reasonable. So wanted to give everybody an update on that. We'll keep tracking the progress, provide updates when needed. Also, I don't know, but there was if everybody knows this, but Tarek Kadri, who's an Oregon resident, is now actually a board member of TARDA. He did want me to pass along that TARDA is having, it's kind of an annual event. Mr. Drake and I went to it last year at the Glass City Convention Center. I don't know, I can't remember if anybody else made it to that or not, but there was an event there last year. They are having another event where they kind of showcase their vehicles and talk about the services they provide and give everybody updates on ridership and things like that. It's at the Convention Center on November 14th from 9 to 10 a.m. He wanted me to pass that along, and he's going to talk to some of the board members, kind of get acclimated, get to know the staff, and then maybe start asking some questions about the services that are provided here. So there's that. One thing I wanted to mention is just a big thank you to the Maumee Valley Beekeepers Association and all of our other partners, Eastern Maumee Bay Chamber of Commerce, those two in particular, for helping with Honey Fest and put that on. I felt like that was a very successful event. It was very hot. I think that the heat kind of chased people out a little bit early, but as you heard from the judge, some of the events that weren't even very well advertised did get a lot of attention. So good event there. The last thing I'll mention is that we do have the master plan survey is live right now. So we do have the flyer. I think, Cassie, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's posted on our Facebook page at this point. So right now we have the QR code that everybody can take and take the survey. We encourage everybody to push that out as much as possible. It's the best way for us to get input, public input, to be added into the master plan. So that's the easiest way. And the last thing with the master plan is that our public meeting has been set. It is October 2nd, and it will be at Buffalo Rock Brewing. So we'll be at the brewery October 2nd from 6 to 8 p.m. So I just want to make that clear. Everything's all set for that. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Mazer. Ms. Purpura?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Purpura. Mr. Roman?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Ms. Spalla?
No report from my standing committee. What I would like to know is, We had a feasibility study done on the water treatment plant. Is that completed or what's going on with that?
No, that's, Mr. President, Mrs. Pauloff, that's ongoing and that'll be ongoing probably over the next 6 months. So, yep. And then the plan will be officially going to design, and to what degree it will depend on that report.
I just haven't heard anything, so I wondered what was going on with that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Pauloff. Mr. Wallenzeck.
No report this evening, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzeck. Mrs. Ackerman.
From my standing committee, our tree commission met on Tuesday, and I want to thank Joel and for bringing Ron from Synovus and walking us through how to submit micro grants for trees, for some tree plantings, and Mr. Roman to help explain how that process works to us. And Amy Stone reached out to me, and she is going to, well, I'll just read it because it's better that way. Come learn the latest information about the spotted lanternfly as we are seeing populations continue to increase in Oregon, East Toledo, and surrounding areas. This program is free and brought to you by the Ohio State University Extension, Lucas County office. It'll be hosted by Amy Stone, and she asked if we would co-host it, even though it's of no expense to the city of Oregon. It will be at Maycomber Lodge on this Thursday at 7 p.m. And if anyone cannot attend but has a question, please get it to me or to Amy, or you can go on the Facebook page for the event and submit your question there. And I wanted to let I thought Honey Fest was a little warm for my taste. I like September cooler, but it was a very nice event. It was very family friendly. The live music was wonderful, and people were just so friendly, and it was just such a pleasant atmosphere. I want to thank you for all that work, Mr. Major. And I hate to list people because I'm afraid I'll forget someone, but Tim Borton did a great job. I'm sure Cassie did a lot of work. I'm sure Hank did a great design on the shirts, and I'm sorry if I forget anybody, but it was really, really a very lovely event. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. Mr. Slander.
No report from my standing committee, I'll just echo that. The Honey Fest was a lot of fun. So they had a good time and it was a great event. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slander. Mr. Drake.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. And I have nothing from my standing committee. Council, I'm sure all of you are getting questions, comments, and concerns about revaluations. I do just want to kind of announce, I know it is on our Facebook page and we're posting it every place we can. The Lucas County Auditor's Office will have representatives here on September 30th and October 1st from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. They're saying if you want to call ahead to schedule an appointment, you can do so, but walk-ins are welcome, and it's an opportunity to speak with somebody from that office about the reval that was just mailed out last week. Just want to make sure I announce that. Outside of that, we have nothing further. I would seek a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Slander. Any objections? Meeting is adjourned.